Welcome to Soul Sessions with Emma. This is a space where I share stories of people who've chosen to live honestly, take risks, and start again. Today, I'm joined by someone whose work I find fascinating, Robbie Cassidy. Robbie is a physiotherapist, content creator, and entrepreneur, and the host of the Rebalanced Podcast. He's built a huge following online by helping people understand pain in a more holistic way, not just what's happening in the body, but what's happening in the mind and the nervous system too. He's also someone who's taken big risks, building a business from scratch, moving abroad, constantly learning and sharing his insights with honesty and heart. He's currently joining me from Brazil, and I'm so looking forward to diving into his journey and the wisdom he's gained along the way. Robbie, welcome to Soul Sessions with Emma.
Thank you very much. It's a lovely intro. I appreciate you having me on.
I love to start at the beginning. So in order to understand the man that you are today, what do we need to know about your upbringing and your younger years?
We're just getting straight into the deep end of it, I guess. So I grew up in Clare, in like a real country village in Clare, way out of the way of, like, I guess any type of a town or anything. The closest shop to us is around about 10 kilometers, if I was getting specific with it. Now, I grew up in a pub in that area, so I was lucky to kind of always be involved in the social aspects, which probably helped me as well. To transition online and to start working by myself. And I kind of was in a position that my parents were entrepreneurs in their own way. So it was nice to kind of see that. And I think, that really helped me to get up and get started. I'm a physiotherapist, so I was always involved in sports as I was growing up, with boxing and football and Jiu-Jitsu and stuff like that. So I always wanted to stay in that scene in some way. That's kind of what I felt I wanted to do anyway. And that's why I think it brought me down the path of going into physio, dealing with injuries, dealing with athletes, and kind of keeping my head in that game, I guess. But since then, I've obviously continued to, I guess, pull on that string a little bit more, and it's brought me down the path of chronic injuries and like chronic back pain and just, I guess, rheumatoid arthritis and different conditions that people have that are longer term, that are not just go in, do your hamstring stretches, do your hamstring rehab, and instead really looking at like a biological, a psychological, and a social aspect to health, because they're so intertwined. So hopefully that kind of makes a little bit more sense as to how I got here, but that's my intro.
Yeah, so what fascinated me about when I was doing my research on you, Robbie, was you do have a very holistic approach, and it also seems that you're very aware of the emotional element of pain and so on. But I'm going to dive into that in a bit. But another thing I just love to know a little bit more about you, because we often, where we are right now isn't a coincidence. It's often something in our childhood or our teenage years maybe that manifested back then. Is there so the drive, as you said, from your family, the entrepreneurship, was there a focus in any way? I mean, as you said, you wanted to work in sport, but was there anything specific to do with pain that really kind of fascinated you in your younger years?
Yeah, I guess, to really go back into the history of it, my family, which is kind of an interesting story, because I know you had Saoirse on the podcast recently. So there is some connection way back when our family came down from the north. We were moved from Fermanagh, let's say, the Cassidys, and we came down as, like, it was a medical kind of a family, you could say. Right? It was they were like doctors and stuff at the time, whatever a doctor would be considered at the time. And if I'm not mistaken, pretty sure it came down with the O'Loughlin's, or some, which would be Saoirse's kind of family, which is some connection to that. But I want to get that correct. I don't know exactly what the connection is there. But anyway, they came down as a medical family from Fermanagh, and it seems to have stuck within the lineage in a lot of ways, because my aunts are nurses and they do acupuncture. In my family alone, like, my sister's a nurse, my other sister's a doctor, I'm a physio, my brother's a biomedical engineer, and then my younger brother's just starting college at the moment. So there was probably that side of it. And then maybe there's, I don't know if you could say, a little bit of epigenetics there as well, with it being passed through, and we all staying involved in some type of a health space. But yeah, that was something that I think always interested me, and knowing the history and knowing where the family came from, and why they moved down. And I think that having dealt with my own injuries as well throughout the years, it definitely put me in a position to feel like I knew something. And then when I actually started going into it, realizing that I didn't know as much as I thought. And a lot of the, I guess, ideas that I had around injury and around pain and around dealing with things were wrong. And I had a lot of experiences through boxing as well, especially where we did a good bit of pain training, where there's a big thing in boxing that you can't quit. Like, quitting is one of the worst things that you do if you go back to the corner and you can't come out. And a lot of that is like your tolerance, what you can hold, and what you're able to take. And you take a lot of beatings in boxing. There's no question you take a lot of beatings in it. And as a result, I think that there was a huge part of that allowed me to understand that, okay, well, we can feel pain, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it should control us. And we actually can have much more of a control over pain than people would expect. And then going into college and into research, or into my undergrad, I should say, I learned a lot more about it, but it was more from the mechanical perspective. And as we drifted into it then, and into my master's, there was a bigger focus on the neurological aspect to it and the emotional aspect of pain. So I think it was just a natural, how would you say, like, progression from one to the next. And now when I look back in hindsight, I can start to make the connections.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really fascinating. And again, I'll get into that in a moment because I did take down some points that you'd had discussed, I think, in another podcast with Brian Keane. And, I'd read the book myself, The Body Keeps the Score, and I'm also studying breath work at the moment myself. So very much aware of the nervous system and the stressors of life and all of that. But yeah, thank you for sharing that about your beginning. Yeah, we had that connection of Saoirse was the first person I actually interviewed on my podcast. And funnily
Really?
enough, I probably mentioned to her that I was doing another course and you were on that, and she had said that you guys had grown up together and that you'd been a good friend of her brother.
Yeah, yeah, we
Yeah,
would have been best friends growing up. Yeah, and Saoirse as well. I knew Saoirse a long
yeah,
time.
yeah.
But
All
me and
hanging
her
out
brother,
together.
exactly. I mean, our brother did a lot of traveling, a lot of moving around together, which was
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, she did share actually that he'd been in Brazil a few times as well, like yourself. So, I mean, if it's okay, I mean, I didn't want to necessarily dive into that straight away, but just now that we have it brought it up, I mean, that must have affected you to a certain degree, losing a friend like that through an illness, at quite a young age as well.
Yeah, it definitely did. Yeah, it definitely did. It had a big impact on me at the time. It's actually the reason that I'm in Brazil. Is Rowan was
Oh, all
here, and
right, okay.
he told me to. He was like, "You need to go to this place," which was in the south originally, in
Yeah.
Florianopolis. He said, "You'll love it." So
Florianopolis, yeah.
it was, yeah. I went down there. After he had passed, I went down there
Yeah.
to kind of follow along that, to see what he was on about, and he was dead right, and I loved it.
Oh,
And since
yeah.
then, I've kind of taken a bit more time to come out here and try to learn the language, and to get an idea, get a better understanding of the country, because the country is still in its origins in a lot of ways.
Mm,
Like, it's such a young
yeah.
country, so, and the people are great here, so I really like it. But losing a friend definitely does have, anyone who's listened to this who has lost a friend or a family member, I'm sure they know that it takes a little bit of time to recover from something like that. It's not something that you can just put behind you very quick. And in
Nice.
my situation, I think it did. It definitely did take a little bit of time. So we do what we can to commemorate him. And he went in. I guess he was lucky that we were all around him when he passed. But a tough couple of months in the lead up to that as well. I don't know how much Saoirse has talked about on it, but a very
Yeah.
challenging couple of months
Yeah.
before him passing as well. But he was a guy who lived a great life, and he lived a life that was, uh, like, for a man who lived for 28 years, he lived a life that people wouldn't live in 70 years. So
Yeah.
it was great to see that as well. And people talking about it after, that was a huge part of it. But yeah, I'm happy to go
Great.
into it, but it's a,
Yeah, no, but that was really my I was just it would definitely, the fact that it almost gets you to think about your mortality, but also, in terms of taking risks and starting again, as my podcast focuses on, it's going to give you that boost, as it did for Saoirse as well at the time when she spoke about it. The fact that she's like, well, why am I worrying about what everybody's thinking? Just get on with it, whatever I want to do, follow my passion and just, do it. And it's fantastic that you've ended up in Brazil and actually in some ways, following on his legacy. And I'm sure he would have loved to have joined you for a few cachaças there.
For sure. For sure. We had enough of them
He's
in other places, though, so I don't think there's any shortage of it at the same time. So,
No, no, that's brilliant. It's amazing. It's millions. So yeah, thank you. So yeah, you've taken some really big leaps, Robbie, and like again, building your own business and moving abroad and kind of being able to travel. Obviously, the fact that you're doing a lot of online work, and then creating the Rebalance podcast. Like, what inspired those choices, to take those leaps?
well, in which way? In terms of the podcast, or in terms of the
So in
business, or
terms
in
of, I
terms
suppose
of the?
that's a lot in one question, but I suppose the first step is even just to move from being a physiotherapist to doing something like content online and expanding your audience much wider.
Yeah. Well, I think that first off, I read a book, and if anyone who is interested in it, I think it was a real eye opener for me, called The 4 Hour Work Week, and it just gave me a different option on what was possible, um, for how you can approach your life and live your life. One big one, I think, was I grew up working for my parents from the age of from a young age, like 10 or 11. We were always doing stuff around and cleaning up in the pub and doing that. And I know for sure that one of the reasons that I took the risk to work online is because I didn't like having people over me. That was definitely a
Mm,
big part of it. Like
yeah.
I didn't like having a boss or a manager, and I have worked in many places. Like I was in the States for a little bit of time, working in restaurants and stuff. So I have in many different scenarios worked under people, but I find better when I work by myself. I think that it's so the risk was more of a it was the risk for me, if I'm being 100% honest, probably didn't feel like that big of a risk because I knew what I could go back to all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that it's probably like, I should be honest about that. I think that some
Mm,
people talk a small bit about, oh, I took a big risk here and there. I took a risk, but I was also safe. Like if all else failed, I could have went back home. Like I have a great relationship with my family. And that was always in the background for me, that if anything went wrong, I could go back and I could restart and set up again. And it does happen that you do jump on board and you try to do that, or you try to go for something and it doesn't work, and you kind of have to come back and reset and rebuild again. And so it did,
mm,
like when speaking about Rowan, me and Rowan went to San Diego. I started it. Me and Rowan went to San Diego together. We were there for a summer, which is actually when he got the original diagnosis. And I had it built up, and then I dropped it for a couple of months, and then I came back and I built it up again. So
yeah.
there is that aspect to it, that you can always reset and you can always rebuild again.
Yeah. Yeah. You had a fallback plan.
As well, like my brother put me in contact with. Originally, my brother was working with a guy called Paul Dermody from Galway, and he was working with Brian Keane. So the Brian Keane connection is funny because I came back like 7 years later and then started working with Brian after that. Um, but yeah, and Brian was a big inspiration for me to get going, and Paul as well.
Yeah. Yeah, Brian is someone that, I only came across him actually just a few years ago when I came back to Ireland myself. And I think his original podcast I was listening to was he was talking about plant medicine, and I had just done it and was kind of fascinated listening to his story. But funny enough, because I'm a teacher myself, and he was so kind, I contacted him, I think it was last year, and had been working with all boys, and they wanted to learn about fitness. And, also I found that Brian is a good role model for young men. So he was just so kind. He answered a few questions for the young lads. And yeah, again, someone who I feel no matter how successful he is, he still remembers, where he came from. Really great. So
Down
he was
there, yeah.
obviously a fantastic mentor to you then, yes?
He was very good. Yeah, he was very, very good to me. And I worked with Brian I worked with him in a one-to-one space, for like a year, where he was really helping me build it up. But it was just that, I guess it was the connection of, he was the big guy at the time as well. When I was starting out, there was no one else online. Like where I was in Clare, I didn't know, there was nobody else in Clare that I knew that was working online. That was like doing a social media or doing content. Now there is a lot more at the moment. But this is like, I've been doing this for 9 years now. So I think that at that stage it was a bit newer, and I didn't really know what to do, what way I should focus or what I should focus on. So looking at that and then listening to Brian, his podcast on the business podcast and stuff like that, and reading books into it, it kind of helped to soften that blow a small bit. But investing in yourself, I think, is so important. I like really in a business context, but in life as well. I think that people underestimate the power that can have on your life, on your behaviors. So yeah, I think that was a helpful way to get over the obstacles at the start, because
Yeah, yeah, absolutely agree with that. I mean, we're always quite reluctant to spend a bit of money on ourselves, but it's an investment in our knowledge, isn't it? And I think it's definitely a big thing. So in terms of mentors, then you had Brian Keane. Was there anyone else that stands out for you along the way that's been a big influence for you in terms of business and growing your content and your audience?
So yeah, I did, like, Brian was excellent. Paul, I should shout him out. Paul was a huge help to me. He just gave me help for nothing. Like, he just took his time, and he went through a lot with me as well. That's Paul Dermody. So he was a huge help. Otherwise, trying to think who else. Like, I did a lot of different courses and stuff like that along the way that were huge, but a lot of it was figuring it out. There's no question. Like, a huge amount of what I was doing was trying to figure it out along the way. And so Sean Casey was good. I'm trying to think who else. Siobhan O'Hagan, I met her actually when I was in Bali. She was very helpful to me as well with different things. So yeah, I think there's a lot of people who've helped me along my journey. But honestly, it's when we talk about taking risks, I think, because I know that this is a big part of the podcast, people probably focus too much on the impact, or like on the what if I fail. And the quote that stood out to me at the start when I got going was, you can only fail when you stop trying in business. Like, as long as you keep ticking along, and as long as you keep working, and as long as you keep figuring it out, working on the trial and error, like figuring out the things, it will start to come together. But people will say, oh, I tried it, it didn't work for me, and then they stopped. And that's just as a point, that is the point that you fail, is when you stop and you stop trying.
So Robbie, your work now really focuses on helping people manage pain from a more holistic point of view. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah. I think that we definitely look at the holistic aspect to it, because a lot of physiotherapy is acute physiotherapy. It's like, you injure yourself and then you go to physio, and then they give you 4 or 5 exercises for your ankle or your hamstring or your hip, or you come out of surgery and then you're like waiting to get back going again. But there's a huge part of that that's missed, where you're looking at people who have recurring injuries, repeated, like, chronic based pain or chronic injuries and chronic conditions, and they are completely underserved. And the reason that they're underserved, I feel, is that there's a lifestyle aspect that's just been looked over. And when we look at we look at the research first, and it shows that there's much more to it. There's much more to the mind-body connection. There's much more to the biopsychosocial, as I mentioned earlier, that the emotions can have a huge impact on the pain that you feel. And really, when you look at physio, the goal is to get people back moving, but it's to get over pain. It's to reduce pain or get back to normal life, and facilitate people getting back to living with freedom. But if we don't understand that pain is dictated by so many other factors, and you're just going after this one mechanical issue that you saw in an MRI, then you're going to run into trouble. So that's why the holistic approach is so necessary, because pain is derived in your nervous system, and there's certain things that will increase it and certain things that will decrease it. And if we don't go after those, you can do everything you want, but it doesn't mean it's going to get better.
Yeah, and when I was listening again, research a bit more about you, I love the fact that you were speaking again about the fact that your language can shape how we experience pain. So when people say things like, I put my back out, or my disc has slipped, it actually amplifies their fear responses. And I don't think many people think about it like that, actually, especially in an Irish context. Have you found that that's been hard for you to kind of almost change the way people speak about their bodies and
Absolutely. And
pain?
it's a great point that you highlighted that as well with the Irish context, because in Ireland, there's a tendency for people to be, well, we would consider modest, but it's also like negative. There's also a tendency to be negative in your approach to things. Oh no, that wasn't that great, or no, sure, here, like it could be better, or with that, for whatever reason, I don't know where it comes from. I feel that it comes from, honestly, I feel like it comes from like colonialism, where you're always the lower class. I feel like there is an element of that in it as well, because I don't get that as much when I'm dealing with or working with Americans or English or like Australians or South Koreans or anything like that, because I work with people from everywhere. But in Ireland, there's definitely a tendency to say the negative as opposed to saying the positive. And then that's going to have a huge impact because it's going to amplify everything. What you're saying, like, as you said, I pulled my disc out. It was excruciating. It was debilitating. I was on the floor. I couldn't move. Like all of these different phrases. But when you look at the situation and you look at what they were dealing with, it doesn't actually align with the issue. It doesn't align. Like I couldn't move. And then if you just put a camera on them in their house, they'd be sitting on the couch, they'd be watching TV, they'd have they'd have a hot water bottle on, they'd pop up, they'd go over, they'd make a cup of tea for themselves. You know, they might make a little bit of food, they'd come back down, they'd sit on the couch. Like it doesn't, I understand that you were restricted in your movement, but you still could move. And we have to be really cautious of the language we use helps us form the beliefs that we have.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that can impact everything else down the line as well.
Yeah. So obviously then that must be something in regards your work that makes you in some ways quite unique, maybe compared to other physiotherapists, that you are thinking of not just the conscious mind but the subconscious as well. And when I was again listening to some of your other work, I came across this study, and I'm sure you've heard of it before, but Dr. Bruce Mosley's study in 2002, he divided patients into three groups, and they were about to get a surgery. I think it was surgery on the knee or something. And one group had real surgery, one group had a different technique of a surgery, and one had like a placebo. And we're told they had surgery, but they didn't. And the results were really fascinating. All three groups improved equally. So that was like, for me, it was like, wow, really proving how much our mind and our thought process is involved in the pain and
Yep,
injury.
like that's a perfect example. There's many of those papers out as well, like with sham surgeries and I love highlighting them because people tell me that, oh, I had to get this surgery, I have to get that surgery. Like there's a surgery, or let's say there's a sham surgery for the rotator cuff. That's what it's called. It's a sham surgery where they just put the incision and they don't do the surgery. And they have it as well for rotator cuff. They have it for the spine. They have it for arthritis. They have like multiple different surgeries that they go in, and I should say papers that they go in and they do the sham surgery, and the recovery rates are like fast, like unbelievable. People are recovering at the same level, even though they had nothing changed. So
Yeah.
there's a huge aspect to it, but it's the same. Like I have a video there. It's probably one of my top performing videos on Instagram is, I'd say, wear and tear isn't the cause of your pain. And people see it and they're like, well, and if you look at the comments, they're like, this isn't true. It's like, I said it and I just showed you the research. Like, it's not that it's just me making this up, but it's like
Yeah.
50% of people over 30 have wear and tear with no pain. So if you look at the MRI results and someone says, oh, you have wear and tear, that's the cause of your pain. And it's not malicious by any means, but from the aspect of the practitioner, but it's not exactly honest either. You know,
Mm.
you have wear and tear, yes, but so does the person that came into the office that brought you in that doesn't have any back pain. They also have wear and tear. So why don't they,
Mm.
if both of you have it, why don't both of you have the same amount of pain? So there's
Yeah.
many other factors that dictate pain as well. And honestly, when we look at the emotional, that's a huge one. That really is a big one.
It really, isn't it, as well? I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Gabor Mate, but I haven't read his book yet. Excellent.
Yeah, that book is also fascinating because what it shows you is very rarely doctors ask people about their childhood and their family upbringing because, you know, again, first of all, if you become quite a people pleaser, you know, you look back into people's history and you realize, you know, they've grown up in a family where they had to be like that. And perhaps, again, you know, it is that mindset of almost doom and gloom. If you grow up in that thinking it can't be fixed, it won't be fixed. I think you said that again in another podcast where you're like, if you can't, if you say, I think it was Brian who said it, and I think it's a Henry Ford quote actually, is if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah,
that one.
absolutely.
So in terms of just your work, Robbie, is there any particular clients that you'd have as an example of that really showed a big, big difference and really for you was a fascinating change over the years?
Yeah, well, lots of them. I've
Yeah.
many of them. But I'm trying to think. Like I've a few very interesting ones with like bulging discs are. I think bulging discs are a nice one to go after because a lot of people probably have suffered with it at some stage, or they know somebody who has suffered with it. Just as a really quick, in a short frame of time, I had a client once who came on, and it was a short term client. She was like, "Oh, I'm having this big flare up," so I was only working with her for like 4 or 5 weeks, and she jumped on, and we got everything calmed down. We were working away, and she was building, like everything was going well. And then she texted me on a Thursday. She was like, "I'm having severe pain." And I said, "Okay, well, this is what we need to focus on. We need to do this, this, and this." And I said, "We're going to be talking on Monday of next week because that's the way it works. We kind of have our calls and stuff." So we jumped on the call on Monday. Sorry, it must have been Monday 2 weeks after. So we jumped on the call and we were talking through it. And I said, "Okay, like, how are you getting on? What changed?" And she was like, "Nothing. I was doing everything right. Nothing changed at all. Like, I don't know why it happened. It's a huge flare up and I can't believe it. And I thought I was going so well." And I was like, "Okay, well, let's break it down and let's go through everything." And we laid out all the days, what exercises she did, what the intensity was like, what the volume was like, everything. You know, and I was like, "Okay, that's really interesting. It just seems like it's a random flare up." And then I said to her on the call, "Did you have any emotional issues? Was there anything going on that was difficult to deal with emotionally?" And she said, "No." And I said, okay, grand. So we stayed going through the call anyway. And I said, "This is really interesting, this case, because generally we can pick out like there's a drop off in water or a drop off in sleep." And she was like, "Yeah, like on Thursday, I couldn't sleep with the pain. I actually had to start, it made me cry." And I said, "That's really tough. I'm sorry to hear that. Let's try and make sure that this doesn't happen again in future." Anyway, went through the whole call, and just at the end of the call, I said, "Let's try to get back on the exercises now and see what we can get up and going." She said, "I won't be able to do the exercises for the next couple of days. I'm moving house." And I said, "Well, that's pretty big. That's a pretty big issue." Like, and there's actually a huge correlation between moving house and flare ups and back pain. So I was like, "Okay, well, that's an interesting one." And I said, "Why are you moving?" And she said, "Oh, I broke up with my boyfriend last week." And I said, "I asked you at the start, did you have any emotional issues at all that were going on?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Okay, now let's backtrack with the exact same pattern as we have done, but let's look at it in the context of you and your boyfriend." And she said, "We had a big argument on the Tuesday. And then on the Thursday, that's when things came to a boiling point that I moved from the house back to, like, I had to move out to another location. And on the Thursday was the day that she had the most pain. Okay. She was like, I woke up crying, or I couldn't sleep because I was crying with the pain." Now, was she crying because of the pain, or was she crying because of the issue of what was going on? And the whole flare up had calmed down by Monday of next week. Like, one day gone. He's like, out of nowhere. I said, "Well, what happened on Monday?" And she said, "We made the decision to break up." Okay. So there was a direct correlation between the days that she was in, like, it was obviously building up for months before that, but there was a direct correlation in the days that it was building up to the point that she was like, okay, it boiled over the top, to the point that she actually decided to move out. And then the next stage of when she was breaking up. And then when she broke up, there was a huge emotional offload.
Mm.
And as a result, the pain dropped. So that's just one very, very simple one. I've had multiple ones like that where it's, you have to look at it and say, okay, you've had a huge flare up here. The body isn't random, like in ways it can be sometimes, but generally there's other factors. And if it's right, if it's coming up as something random, there's a possibility that there's something that needs to be processed, or something that you are holding down and you're not allowing it to come to the surface. So that was a really clear one. Another interesting one with a lady who couldn't walk with a bulging disc, and we got her back to running a marathon in 20 weeks. And it was great, like fluid. This is over COVID. Got back, got going, like was going really, really well. And then after a marathon, she was like, okay, let's stay training together. I'm seeing a big improvement. And I said, okay, excellent. And then I think it was about 4 weeks after the marathon, her shoulder started getting really bad and so severe that it gets to the point that it's like, there's certain symptoms that if you get, I have to say, go to your doctor, because they're like red flags. So I was like to her, okay, go to your doctor. We need to get that checked out just to be sure. She went to the doctor. It was all clear. And then she came back. Now, she was supposed to be starting back at work because she had been out of work because of pain. And I said, okay, is there anyone at work that you want to avoid? Like, is there any situation there that you're trying like not to get back to, or a person that you would prefer not to come in contact with? And then she just opened up and she said it on the call. It was like a light switch. She was like, yes, there's a lady. The reason I left work is because of work wanted. We had an argument in work whether we should close down for COVID. She was in a position that she was financially stable during COVID because her husband was working. The other lady wasn't in a position that she was financially stable. So the other lady wanted to stay open. She was like, I think we should close for health and safety reasons, which makes sense as well. And then when she was able to get back going and everything was going well, and now the situation, she was about to be put back into the environment. This is why we talk about the biocycle and social. She was being put back into the environment where there was going to be conflict again, because conflict at work or conflict in a relationship are two of the biggest drivers of pain. Financial insecurity is another one. And she was going to be put back in that situation. Everything flared up, but it was a new area. It didn't have to be her back. Now it was her shoulder. And until we actually really went into that and laid out boundaries and understood it in more detail, she was able to get back to work and things calmed down and she was able to work through it. But if you didn't deal with that, she would have went back, it would have flared up again, and she'd be going down the road of getting surgeries that she didn't need to get.
It just fascinates me, Robbie, how in this day and age people are still not necessarily seeing the connections between their environment and like what would you say? Is it mainly to do with people not wanting to think about it, or they just genuinely don't see the link?
Yeah, it's very hard to put to kind of pick out an exact reason why, I think. And the reason being is that with pain, it's the fear of pain that's the biggest problem. Okay, like that really is the biggest problem. If you knew, okay, I'm just going to work through this, it's sore, like you sprain your ankle, I'm going to have to walk through it. It's going to be sore at the start, and then I'll get over it. And you understand that that's the side of it. But if you do have this pain that comes up out of nowhere, and there's a history of, let's say, heart attack in your family, or a history of stroke in your family, or your father has had back surgery, or your mother has been debilitated or has 2 new hips, like then it changes everything, the entire image that you have in your head about what's going on. And something that amplifies in your environment, it boils over. And now you start feeling this pain somewhere in your body. You're not going to connect that to this, because first off, you probably know yourself, when you're in a state of high stress and you're in a state of overwhelm, it's very hard to isolate factors. It's very, very difficult to say, okay, this is this over here. I need to deal with this over here. Everything comes in together. Everything weighs on you, and you're not able to differentiate between it. So now you start connecting to this pain, and this becomes your biggest problem because it's physical and you can feel it.
Well, I think it's amazing to have someone like you out there anyway that's seeing those connections, and it's always obvious that you're very passionate about what you do, Robbie. So before I finish up, there's a few other things I wanted to ask you, if that's okay. Just
Yeah.
linking back to your own personal interests. I see you're into jiu-jitsu, and obviously you're there in Brazil and you're probably enjoying it big time. So tell us like why that particular sport, because it always seems like certain people choose that sport. Is there certain attraction to the sport that you that took you to it, or?
Yeah. So I grew up boxing. I started boxing when I was like 4 years old. My father was my coach, and he was one of the coaches in the club. And I stopped when I was 21. So I've always been involved in combat sports, and I definitely needed something to transition out of. I was kind of transitioning out of boxing between 21 and 23, but I wanted something else that I could still get the contact element to it, because it's a great way of managing emotions, first off, as well. Like, you can go in there, like a lot of people that I work with, I tell them, go in and do a boxing class or a Muay Thai class or hit a bag. Just get the anger out of you. If you have anger in you, just get it out of you. Stress or whatever you want. So I feel that it keeps me in a very calm state. That's one side to it. Jiu-Jitsu is really nice because it's like physical chess as well. So there's a cognitive side to it. Like, obviously boxing as well, but boxing is a cognitive side, but it's pretty, it adds up, you could say. The cognitive side, you start to get slow after a while if you're going to keep taking hits. So I wanted to get out of it before that happened to me. But in Jiu-Jitsu, you have the cognitive element to it, this like the strategy element, and then there's a huge physical element. And if I was being completely honest, I would believe that like one of my love languages is definitely physical touch. It definitely is. I can go into Jiu-Jitsu, I can go through a class, and I'll walk home, and even if I got annihilated in the class, I'll still feel really good after it. And I think that that's something that, I don't know, maybe I grew up with it. I like, I like
Do you
contact
think it's
sports.
for men, the fact that they, even though it's in the form of sport, to still getting that like bit of oxytocin, like the touch, but like maybe in a psychological way, that's what's going on for them, like a hug.
I think so, yeah. And I think that there's definitely, well, for there's a lot of women that do it as well, and they love it. Like,
Yeah,
there's a lot of women that are really good at, like, top quality,
yeah,
especially here in Brazil, kids that are just really, really good. In the case of men getting that, I think that you get humbled. I think men need to be humbled more. I really do. I think that there's a lot of men walking around who are big, tough guys, jump at like countrymen, like conservative, like in everything, and they're like, they don't want to be seen as I won't even go down that path, but they don't want to be seen as feminine in any way. Okay,
yeah.
because they have views on what that looks like or what that would be like. So the ego grows and it gets so big, and they never get humbled. They never get put down and put in a position that you get beaten. And without having that, you have a very false sense of who you are. And until you can actually get humbled, I mean, get humbled by like a 16-year-old blue belt who is just a phenom, and they have a lot of those here. You go home after that, and a 16-year-old child is after like outsmarting you in every way. That's you have to just put your ego aside and see that, okay, this is something that I need to improve on. This is an element that I need to get better at. But a lot of people can't take that. A lot of people will avoid, and they'll say, no, it's too tough. Like, or they won't say it's too tough. I'd say, this is what they'll say. It's not for me. I didn't like it. You know, I just do, like, my body doesn't move like that. You know, they'll have all these excuses to why it was, but the real side of it was they just got a humbling, and they never got a humbling in their life before. And
I love that. I love
what's it?
that approach to it. And I think, we won't go into the state of masculinity today, but
I can
but
go into
someone said to me
it.
recently, I thought it was a really good point, that tough times breed tough men and weak times breed weak men. And I think we're in that crisis at the moment where men don't really know where they belong. And I think it's for another podcast, but I think that it's just been really fascinating to see, the changes in dynamics between the genders, and actually a lot of men not really being strong in their decision making and their power. And I'm hoping things will start to turn and change. But yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of reminds me, jiu-jitsu obviously seems like it has some of those great principles that men could learn from.
I think there was research as well that came out, and I saw it recently, and I was like, oh, that I could connect that to so many people. And it was men who are, let's say, would be considered objectively weak in their skill set, are more likely to be aggressive towards women online and in person, and more likely to look up to alpha males, which I was like, okay, when you look at like we look at, like, when you look at the Andrew Tate side of things and you look at all of that, there's like people like really looking up to him. And if you look at a lot of the guys that really look up to him, like I wouldn't say that I agree or disagree with everything that he does, because I don't
Mm,
for anyone. Like, I don't
yeah.
agree or disagree with everything that
Mm,
anyone does. I like, there's good parts and bad parts to everyone's opinions. But when you look at that, and then you look at the comments on Instagram, and you see that there's like a girl who's doing jiu-jitsu. You look at the people who comment underneath that. There's a guy, he's really good from Ireland, Pa O'Dwyer. Do you follow him on Instagram?
oh yeah, yeah, I know him. Yeah.
He's excellent. He's excellent for calling out
Yeah.
people for like I saw one recently, a really, really skilled young girl. She was like 11 years old, hitting pads, like hitting boxing pads. And then the comments all underneath it were men, like in their 30s and 40s, saying, oh, like, yeah, but one punch and she'd be knocked out, or like one slip up and that, or I could just hold her down. Like, just crazy stuff.
Um,
Like, how could you get into the mindset that you feel that you would have to make a point like that? You know, that's you just haven't been humbled enough. that's
no.
that's what it is.
Yeah, and it's
You need
it's
to be
too
humble.
easy to be a keyboard warrior as well, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
need to be humble.
But yeah, in terms of that, it's great to see as well, even your own mindset. It's having those role models out there. That's really what we need, isn't it? To see young men starting to see you can have both parts to you. You don't have to be one or the other. Um, but just before I finish, Robbie, I know you're a busy guy. You've just achieved so much, and between your online presence and your podcast and the work that you do with clients, um, I know that you're always evolving. What's next for you? What's exciting you right now?
What's exciting me right now? I think there's one thing that's really scaring me.
Yeah.
And if I didn't bring it up, I'd probably be. So I had an ACL injury in my last jiu-jitsu competition. And I was out of jiu-jitsu for 2 years. And I always talk about fears and beliefs and getting back into exercise. And I think I am coming up on the time that I need to get back into competitive jiu-jitsu again. So that's very exciting for me, but it's also very scary, because the last
Right.
time I was in it, I had to take 2 years off after training, like, properly. So that's definitely something that I think is on the top of my mind right now. Otherwise, what is exciting me? I love the way I'm liking to see how I guess the general population is starting to evolve in their understanding of health, and how people are moving away from quick fixes and moving away from this idea that, like, first off, that everything needs to be fixed. Everything doesn't need to be fixed. That's like a huge thing. You know, some things you have to accept and you have to live with.
Yeah.
And I think that people are starting to come around to that a bit more. Now, there could be a whole other podcast on what that means. But in, yeah, I think that's something that is becoming really apparent to me at the moment, how sometimes you just have to live with something, understand that this is going to be the case, and accept it. And I'm starting to see that more in the clients that I work with, and yeah, online, I guess.
Yeah,
Acceptance.
I agree. Mhm. Yeah, we want everything right now, don't we? We think we can play God with whatever we want. I mean, I see that even in young people. So yeah, it's definitely a good point. So before we wrap up, if it's okay, Robbie, I have this new section at the end that I've created, and it's called Soul Sparks, because my podcast is called Soul Sessions with Emma. So it's just like a quick fire round, and it's like just whatever comes into your mind. It's not too revealing, don't worry.
Okay,
So
that could be dangerous.
So, just four or five things. So, a book that's changed your life or really influenced you.
Why zebras don't get ulcers. Yeah, definitely.
A daily ritual that you must do or that
Make
grounds
my
you.
make my bed in the morning.
Okay, very good. A risk you're glad you took.
Um, Working by myself. Yeah, or I could also say solo traveling, going somewhere and trying to figure it out is another huge one that I would say anyone should try to do, even if it's just for a week or two.
Yeah, I agree. And a person who's inspired you the most.
Outside of my mother and father, person who has inspired me the most. That's a tough question. Um, I, I'd actually say, I would say Rowan in a lot of ways, which is Saoirse's brother, because of he got a diagnosis 5 years before, and he knew that that was going to come back around, but he didn't ever say it, and he still was able to live his life as if he didn't have that.
Beautiful. Um, and if people were to share something, if friends were to talk about you, what would you like them to say about your character, most of all?
I am. He was honest, I think.
Mm, that's a good quality to have. Thank you so much, Robbie, for taking the time today to speak to me. I really do appreciate it. What I love about your approach is how you remind us that pain isn't something to fear. It's just information, and it's our body's way of asking us to slow down and to listen, and maybe to begin again. If people want to follow you and your work, obviously, your podcast is called Rebalance, but where else can they find you if they want to link up with you?
Yeah, I guess the podcasts. I have a YouTube channel, Robbie Cassidy, and that started recently, so I'm just building that. My Instagram is Robbie Cassidy _. You can just send me an email at info@themobilitytutor. That was my old brand, which will be coming back, but that was my older brand, yeah. Or LinkedIn, Robbie Cassidy, whatever you want. I'm on everything. And luckily, there's only one other Robbie Cassidy in the world, and he's a wrestler. So
We won't
no, it's
confuse
not
you
a
too
wrestler.
much.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Well, look, as I said, it's been an absolute pleasure. And, you're a gentleman because you didn't need to speak to me today and you took time out of your day. And I really appreciate it. And have a fantastic day. And thanks again for speaking to me.
Oh, thanks a million for having me on, and really enjoyed it. It's a nice alternative way of looking at things, because a lot of the podcasts I'm on, we either focus on one specific thing or another. So it was nice to cover a broad variety of topics. Thank you so much, Emma, and all the best with your podcast.
If you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe and comment on anything that resonated with you today, and help me to grow this podcast so that I can share stories of real people and inspire others. Thank you.